So, I thought I'd share this little challenge with you. So, the brakes were pulling a bit when I took her out for a drive. So I came back to check them and found that I've actually got a leak on one of the near side differential output shaft. So, this is what it looks like. That's the back plate for the drum, and on that side, that's where your drive shaft bolts on. So, it's all a bit horrible. So, I'm going to have to renew all of this stuff. So, here's the challenge, is that trying to get a socket in there, almost impossible. So, I tried I got hold of a box spanner. Box spanner might fit on there, but it just moves around because it's too soft. It's like cheese. So that's no good. So what I've decided to do is to make a long extension piece. So I had a socket here. This was once a socket. It was a 28mm one, which I've now ground the middle out so it's 29, so it fits over the nut in the middle. So with those two bits, and I'm going to weld this bit in the middle, so it looks like it's on the flat. Looks like that, and then that will go over the top of that. Will then go over the top of the shaft, so I can take that out. So that's how I'm going to do it. Hopefully I can get some decent welds on this fairly thick stuff, and that will do it. Give it a go.
Now, good afternoon.
Well, here it is. It's a bit ugly because I was rushing, but it should do the job. Now we can try it out on here and see if it actually does the business for us.
Service shaken from top to bottom. Weirdos and misfits recruited to drive change. As for the MPs who provided the government with the majority, they too were held in contempt. I
had read somewhere that these are
a radical,
nice chap called Tony sent me some information. Apparently they're handed. This is the left hand or the near side hub, and that came off with a normal left hand thread. So I don't know what that tells you. Anyway, that's the wonderful nut that is 29mm. So now we've got that off, we can take this out. We can actually change the seal, which you know, the seal's like £2. It's ridiculous. Anyway, there we go.
With the notorious king
so once you've got the shaft out, the nut, the shaft goes through here obviously, you're then faced with this thing. Someone's already been in here on this one, so I just use the same spot to unscrew it. So this unscrews and comes off, and that gives you access to the bearing. And then presumably I can pop the bearing out, and that will then give me access to the oil seal, which is the actual thing I wanted to deal with. Oh my god, it takes so long to do one tiny thing. Okay, so this bearing with a few little taps popped out of this housing without too much difficulty.
Because nobody had ever,
if it had given me any trouble, I probably would have heated it up. So
maybe the word is generosity.
The relationship with Leary ended, and Joanna lived for a time on an old sailboat
feels
in
good.
the Caribbean. She renounced
so we just got to pop this little seal
out,
out, which is the actual bit that we wanted to get at all that time ago.
Podcasts called Future Primitive.
She decided to start interviewing people for her own, to satisfy at first her own curiosity, and then this became a larger thing, and she had a lot of follows, and I think she had 10,000 subscribers by the end.
And what about your relationship with her? Because it sounds to me as though you yourself must have had quite a difficult past. I wonder if it took a bit of time for you to reconcile with her.
It's the seal out.
It took us the past 35 years. You know, my life with her was not a very healthy life for a 5-year-old.
You must have felt abandoned in many ways.
I was abandoned.
So,
using cheaper, but
very competent. So bearing knocked out easily enough, as I say. So I've you can see where I've knocked the seal out on both sides with my little drift. But whoever was in here before had managed to put some score marks in here
motors and their
which
racing
I've
applications.
now cleaned up
BBC needs to save
using a bit of
800 million
Abranet
pounds by the end of this
120
licensing
grade.
period in
So I've just been
April
around and cleaned that up so there's no
2022.
sharp edges on it.
BBC News
So
is
now I can put
estimating
the
8
new
million
seal
pounds
back
worth of
in,
savings
stick the bearing back
by
in, and you know,
520
rebuild the
jobs
thing.
in the network.
But I've got to say, it's a very complicated way of doing something. I mean, considering that farmers were supposed to have been able to fix these at home,
Well, as I said,
I mean, they wouldn't have a chance with something like this with,
from BBC News.
without some
Declined,
decent
and we were
tools.
given these
Anyway,
statements in seas and the meaning of flowers. The episode
so
we're discussing was the last
this
one.
ring then
There
goes
are
on.
more about dogs and music. So here's the test. You're not out of your comfort zone, but will you listen? And go back
Clockwise.
to any of the previous 4 essays about dogs, Stuart?
I would politely decline the
So,
invitation.
in order to tighten this up, I'm just going to use a oil filter wrench.
Just a little. It depends. I have to say, it depends what breed they are. I mean, I'm only interested.
One of
in
these.
boxers 'cause
By April 2022.
Right, so we're going to put this back together now. So just going to use a bit of this stuff just inside the housing because it has been bruised by being beaten up before.
Dramatically over the last year.
And after having gone through all the trouble of getting this far because of a leak, we don't want to end up with another one. So I'm going to just put in some of that stuff in first before I then pop the seal in on top. And we'll find a
So I think we can
tools to just
guess
push
from
that down
the
with.
license fee is not going to go up dramatically, is it? So news has
Hopefully.
continued, you would imagine, problems throughout the next 4 or 5 years.
I am
Just
not
go down by hand, actually.
sanguine about the BBC's position because
seems to.
clearly they are losing younger audiences, especially in television. And there's
Clean the
such a
back of
huge
that,
amount
make
of
sure we
choice
haven't
now.
got goo
And
everywhere.
therefore, I think it's probably quite a good thing that the government and the BBC look at what the size and shape of the BBC should be. And there should be a rational dialogue about that, and nobody can object to it. I do think it should be a rational dialogue. You sometimes hear noises coming out of Downing Street that sound punitive or as if they really want to destroy the BBC, and that mustn't be allowed to happen.
That's
But
okay.
having a conversation seems right, and I also hope they'll let Tim Davey get on with
So
it. He's
that
a
didn't
youth
need any
director
help to go
general
down.
with an agenda, and he needs to be given time to reshape the BBC.
The other thing about using a little bit of the gasket maker stuff on there is
with the possible
it does help it to
exception of full reporters.
gives it a bit of lubrication to slide into place.
Head of TV News and editor of
Clean
Today.
that up.
And please do tell us your thoughts about that interview or anything else to do with BBC Radio.
Okay, that looks good.
This is how
So-
to get in touch.
You can send an email to feedback@bbc.co.uk or write a letter. The address
There's
is
a little
feedback,
hole in that. I think
PO
I've probably got
Box
it comes out there by the looks of it.
London.
Let's make sure that points downwards when we put it back in.
You can follow our activity
I
on
didn't
Twitter
check when I
by
took it
using
out whether or not that was pointing down,
feedback.
because
Or
it does
you can
appear
call
you
us
could
and leave a
mount
phone
this either
message
way up.
on 03 333
And if it was the wrong way up, I'm guessing that
544.
that wouldn't be able to
Standard
drain, so that
satellite
might
charge
impact the
supply,
seal.
But it could cost more on some mobile networks.
So,
All those details are on our website.
right.
Partner Stuart Taylor from London. Veronica, first of all, to get a sense of your listening habits, what would be your top 3 programmes if you were stuck on that mythical desert island?
For me, it would be Saturday Live with Rich Clothes and hopefully Nikki Betty Still. It's a very warm programme, it's very relaxed, and I love the kind of eclectic mix of guests, just as you find on Loose End with Clive Anderson. And I also really enjoy Women's Hour.
And what about you, Stuart, your top 3?
First off would be the book club. Secondly would be Thinking Aloud. And thirdly would be Woman's Hour, a really interesting and insightful perspective on more than 51% of the world's human inhabitants.
Well, the programme always says about 40% of its audience are male, so
Yes.
there must be a lot of people like you listening in. Well, we've asked you to review a very different sort of programme. It's an edition of the Essay, a series about composers and their dogs. It's on Radio 3, it lasts almost 15 minutes. And we've asked you to look specifically at episode 5, Cocker Spaniels. Well, Veronica, how would you describe the programme? What's it about?
Well, I would say it does exactly what it says on the tin. I really liked this programme. I thought it was quite short, to the point, and it was just kind of warm and a bit, for me, quirky. And it kind of touched my heart because, you know, we have a dog that's part Cocker Spaniel, And and I recognised him in some of the comments that were being made about the dogs of these composers.
Stuart, I take it since you are a joint owner of the dog, you probably share some of those views, yes?
To our point, I am perhaps, since we're talking about dogs, maybe a little bit more hard-bitten.
Yeah, he's a bit more hard-bitten, yeah.
I found this programme interesting-ish.
Make sure we tap it in square.
For me and my palate, a little bit too saccharine and a little bit too dog-centric. Interesting, but not prime listening for me.
Normally, Marvel wouldn't have been allowed into the Windsor Guinness at all. But it's the best man.
That's pretty good.
And it's his favourite Cocker Spaniel.
We'll do the rest of the advice.
Of the wedding party.
Devotion,
Now
through their
in.
love, through their loyalty, so it's become almost indispensable to their owners.
I mean, it was interesting. I didn't personally get this feeling that, whether we're talking about Elgar or Elton John, that they had been inspired to write by their dogs. But I did get the sense that the dogs
Right, I'm going to
were
put this
very
ring back on.
deeply a part of their lives. And
Give that a
certainly
clean up
fed
before I do anything
their
with it,
emotional
because it
lives.
looks a bit horrible.
But I wouldn't say that they were the direct inspiration as such.
Well, there was one claim in the programme that I think the programme for the rest of Britain.
Okay, so put the cap on, again with the oil filter wrench. It says in the book of words that you need 55 pounds per square foot of torque. So I've done it up with that. Quite difficult to achieve. It's pretty tight. So just greasing this up. There's this baser that goes in here, which actually fits in behind the bearing there. Right, let's just
Feedback was presented
pop
by
him
Roger
in.
Bolton and the producer was Kate Dixon. It's a Juniper Connect production for BBC Radio 4. Next week, Justin Rowland, the Chief Environment Officer,
So,
will be on the programme. And you can write to feedback.
I think
PO
that's
Box
it.
67254,
And then I
London
think all we have to do
SE123,
now is
or
to
call 03
fit this
444 544.
back
Those
onto
details are available
there.
online, where you can also subscribe
Well, that's
to Feedback
actually I've done that
podcasts.
wrong.
Next week, Tim Harford offers his take on the story that's dominated the news.
A dramatic
That
breakthrough
goes on
in the
afterwards.
race for a COVID vaccine.
Can't get it off now because it's all greasy.
Now what? Now an unprecedented logistical effort unfolds. How effective are all these new
Thought that was a bit too
vaccines
simple.
going to be?
Right, so
What
that goes
behind
on
the scenes
first,
as they're manufactured,
down to there.
injected. Who should get priority and who will get priority? What about the people who mistrust the very idea?
Let me clean that
We'll
up
be
before I do it.
searching for answers in the defining story of the pandemic. One way is to do this as
Just done a checking round here, make sure, because I hadn't looked at that to make sure there aren't any scores in it. Seems all clean enough.
As we head towards a real Brexit
Should
deal
be able to now
deadline,
get
our
this
Euro
on.
editor, Katja Adler, will talk us through the
With that,
and it appears Dominic
this
Cummings
facing
could be taking
downwards.
another trip.
You guys should get out of London.
He's said to be leaving his role at number 10. What does the nation lose and what does it gain? We'll start with the BBC News. Read
so it
today
just
by
cools
Susan
down.
Wright.
The Chief Constable of West Yorkshire
There we go.
Police has apologised
Ugh.
to the families of women
It's a bit
murdered
stiff.
by Peter Sutcliffe for the language used by
So then
officers
that
at the time.
ring, which I had,
Sutcliffe was
oh there it is,
jailed in 1981
this
and
little
10
ring,
13 women died in hospital last night at the age of 74 after refusing treatment for coronavirus.
drops
Here's our Home
into
Affairs correspondent,
that
June
hole.
Kelly. For 5 years, West Yorkshire detectives tried
press it
and
down.
failed to find the Yorkshire Ripper. He was eventually arrested
One of those
early in
times where having gloves on is a bad
1981
idea.
by police from the neighbouring force. West Yorkshire officers were heavily criticised over both the misguided focus of their investigation and their attitude towards the women who died. They described some as innocent, implying that others who were working as prostitutes were not. Now, more than 40 years later, the force has apologised. The current Chief Constable, John Robbins, said the language may have reflected the attitudes of the day, but it was as wrong then as it is now. Senior backbench Conservatives say they hope relations with Downing Street will be reset with the departure of Dominic Cummings from his job as Boris Johnson's chief advisor. Mr Cummings said in January he intended to make himself redundant
Well, that's quite
by the
difficult
end
to
of
fit.
the year.
It's thought his exit has been accelerated by infighting at number 10. Here's our political correspondent, Leila Nathan.
I might
It
just
was barely 6
put
months
that
ago
bush in
that the Prime
first.
Minister resisted considerable pressure to sack Dominic Cummings over his notorious lockdown trip to Durham. Such was his importance to the Downing Street operation. But the winds of change are in the air, and now Mr Cummings is expected to leave number 10 by the end of the year. A 23-year-old man has been arrested.
Right, so that, the little ring is in there now inside the seal.
A police officer who was shot inside a custody centre in South London in September.
Scooch out.
Said the suspect, who also suffered a gunshot wound, was still in hospital.
And toxic
Just jumping ahead again.
So,
So, back plate. Make sure you get the back plate on, then this on, then the nut on, then torque it up. £55 plus £55 foot. That's the plan. Just going to do that now.
Already run out of intensive care beds.
Actually, just checked it. It's not 55 for this one.
There's no way you
For this one, it's 86 to 101. So that's what I'm going to do in gradually with the torque wrench. Right, so gasket behind, 6 bolts holding it in. I've now torqued those up to the right level. Put new slave in, put new slave in on the other side too, and I've got a new set of shoes which I'm going to put in as well. And there's all of the linkage as well for the handbrake, which has got to go on. So yeah, still got a bit of work to do here, getting all this back together. I'll come back to you in a while when I've got the shoes in. So here's what I'm using to do the job. Mine is the small brake drum version, 200mm, I think. What's that in real money? 8 inches, something like that. So looks nice, doesn't it? Like, sucker for a pretty box. And inside you've got these. And many other suppliers would just give you this, whereas Burton's give you a nice box to go with it. So you feel a bit less bad about spending the money. Noting that we've got some new linkages in here as well, which I wasn't expecting. I was expecting to have to try and beat the linkage off the old ones in order to get them fitted. So we've got a couple of new, I think they must be the trailing shoes. Let's just cut this up on end. And then, are they the trailing? That must be the leading one, right? So that's got the linkage attached to it. So this is pretty cool. I've got the springs and stuff that I need anyway, so I can start getting it all back together. Let's put it on. Right, I've copper slipped the items where they move. There's a spring on the back, and the lever goes on the back. That's got to go into the handbrake cable that you can probably see poking out there. It's ought to be possible to just do it in one go, so, but it might all fall to bits because there's nothing really holding it together other than the spring. So let's try and give it a go. See if we can manipulate everything.
I've been training the giant kangaroo for about 15 months. First of all, he hitched up in a hotel in Sydney, disguised as a good boy. But I knew the real trick. As he headed for the bush that night, I realised that he had many different disguises. One of them was Helen Shapiro.
Right. Right, that doesn't want to go on there. Oh, there we go. Right, now it's on. Alright, now we've got to try and get that over there. Is that going to happen? I don't think it is it? Does that... Sorry, I'm laughing at the radio programme. it's just not quite enough room for it to go over there, is there? So I've got to pull that off, take the spring off and pull that off. You've got to hold all of that together so it doesn't all fall to bits. Get behind there. Oh look, you see, that comes off it too easily. I knew this was going to be a pain in the arse. You can tell sometimes just by looking at something it's going to be a flipping nuisance. Let's get that around there. Right. And then that's got to go behind there, where I can't actually feel where the thing is now, and I can't see it, obviously. Giles Brandreth on Beyonce. It's going to be good for a laugh.
Because I'm familiar with her. I had a difficult relationship with her own father, and when we met, she immediately recognized me as the dad substitute.
Frightening thought. Right, so that's got to go on there, and now we've got to put the other bit on. So I'm trying to hold that with that hand at the same time as putting that on there. Getting that hooks round. Getting that hook round there. And we've got to hook it onto that.
One at a time. One's going to be a boy named after me, and the other one's going to be a girl. The name's not yet been decided, so I will explain. I'm pitching to people as well. I don't know what you're talking about.
Right, that's too difficult. You've got to get the spring over there. It's much easier trying to do it the way I was doing it before.
If you like it, then you should have put a ring on it. That is one of the things that Beyonce said. She was actually at an agricultural show. She had a fine bill.
Ah, there we go. Right.
People to lead it away, but unfortunately there was no way to say that. So
That was a fun fight. Right, let's get that around there. That goes on there. He goes on there. Still got the handbrake on, so that's good. And that's got to go in there. Right. And then we've got these two little eccentrics. Not quite sure what's eccentric about them, apart from the fact that that hole's not in the middle. Perhaps they do strange things at the weekends when you're not looking. More of the copper slip.
It's called the Himalayas because it's tall and narrow and has 7 floors of bedrooms going up.
We've got to centralise these. I have to make a little tool in a minute to do that.
Will you tell us something about the Himalayas in this game if you can? Starting now. Indeed, when Beyonce and I went mountain trekking in the Himalayas, it was an extraordinary.
I've got greasy fingers, I don't want to touch the pad, the friction surface. There we go.
Breathing deeply, feeling the extraordinary ozone and the magic of the Himalayas. There you expect to see extraordinary film stars. Oh yes,
Yes, repetitive extraordinary.
Well, you've got 16 seconds if you want it. The Himalayas are starting now.
The Himalayas.
Well.
Oh, you're going first.
Right.
14 seconds ago. Tell us something about the Himalayas starting now.
The sardines live next door, and on the other side was the Himalayas.
Right.
Himalayas, Sarah Himalayas.
That's that in. So then we've got washers and nuts to go on there. That's the easy part. And then we can start setting up the shoes to work correctly. because they need to be the same distance in all angles from the edges. Now looking at that and thinking, if I put that on the right way up, I better have a quick check.
Who put his finger in the dike. It was leaking and he approached it, and luckily he had very
It must be that way round. The shoes are handed, so that's the one for the other side. Yep. So it must be at the bottom. It's the only way you can tell, really, because if you look at what's in the very exciting Haynes manual, you can see that the friction surfaces cover the whole thing. And you've got the spring in a different place. Never mind. Right, so we must be okay. Right, so all we need to do is get those nuts on. I'm going to do that now, and then I'm going to make a tool that we can use to make sure that these are all lined up. Right, so just pop the eccentrics on the bottom and the lock nuts that go with it. So we're ready to go now. Now I made a little piece of wire, just using one of the bolts for the drive shaft, a washer and a big nut that I found lying about. So the idea is that you can spin this round and it just touches the lining all the way around. So I don't know if you can hear that. I'm listening to that and thinking we're a little bit low down here, but fairly good up there. So I'm going to adjust to that one. By the way, the eccentrics have been set so that the shoes are in as far as they can. So obviously you can adjust them back out again. So that's what I've done at the bottom. But you know, it just depends on how all this works. But what we're trying to do, of course, is to keep the linings true with the inside of the drum. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, is just go around and adjust these now.
And just this apples or rennet that Raymond loves because it can be eaten raw as a fruit and also cooked with. That illustrates a big divide between apples grown on the continent, which were multi-purpose, and British apples, which for the most part were not.
So I should stop that flying off. Right, just take that off now.
This tradition of apples into the very top quality,
And then we can get the drum on.
which were called the dessert apples, which would go to the dining table for this grand finale of fresh fruit at the end of the meal. And the others, a specific group which they concentrated on breeding and raising
we go. It's my little tool. Simples. Just got a bit of wire wrapped around it. Right, I'm going to clean this drum out and then we can put it on. Right, so give the drum a good clean out. Roughed it up a bit. Right, so I'll put the pin through the back. Once you've got the pin through the back, I've got my finger there, you can see it. Then we need a cap and a spring. And then the fun part is actually putting it onto the pin and twisting it whilst holding it all together and the pin not popping out the back. Right, we're now ready to get the drum on after having a fight for about the last hour with this one. The problem not being so much being able to get the spring and the cap on, which is always a bit of fun, but you've got to get the pin in behind here. So I think if I was doing this job again, I'd make sure that I put the pin in and stuck it in the back with a bit of grease or something before putting the plate on, because you can hardly get in there to put that pin in. It was extremely challenging, even with you know, a pair of very long-nosed pliers down the back of it. And then of course holding it into position is quite difficult. You've got to stick something down the back of it to do it. You cannot feel the hole with my fingers. You can't feel the hole that's down there. They're not long enough, or they're fat enough. They're too fat probably. Anyway, right, now we can actually get the drum on. Hooray! How long's that taken? Right, here we go. Let's see if I can get that on the screen. Right. I'll jack the car up so that I could get underneath it to try and see what's going on. There we go. Let's put a new clip on that boot. Oh, actually, see what I'm going to do before I do that. Is I'm going to adjust the cams at the back. It's quite loose. That's about right. Slightly. There's the bite. Right. Now we can get the shaft on. Line the holes up.
The way that women and men communicate is really quite different, isn't it?
That's what men are very personal. I don't want to express their thoughts.
Yeah.
You know, where women are a bit more open.
Yeah.
Because every woman's struggled with the same things. At birth, you know, everyone's had a
That's just one in. I've got the others here. I'm going to put some Loctite on these so that they don't, because there doesn't seem to be any sort of, normally you have a little tab that goes in between two and then you just fold the tab over. There doesn't appear to be anything for these, so I'm going to Loctite them unless I can find a spring washer that's about the right size. Anyway, this isn't going to be exciting, so I'll turn this off because I'm literally just going to bolt this up and torque it, that's all.